So you know everyone's always like, get ready with me whilst I tell you the most traumatic thing of my life, or get ready with me whilst I tell you what I went shopping for. Well, how about package up some boxes with me whilst I tell you about my story, how I got into running my own business and finding my style and just going with traction. So I knew from an early age that all I wanted to do with my time was art. I was an only child as well, and I spent most of my childhood in the pubs. I'm not saying my family's a bunch of pissheads, but let's just say they really liked to drink, and I found that so boring as a kid that literally what they would do to try and entertain me is like rip up beer mats and like let me draw on the backs of them whilst they're getting drunk in the pub. And that's where the whole thing sort of originated from, was me just trying to entertain myself as a kid. But because of that, it led to me just developing a wild imagination, because I didn't have brothers and sisters to play with. And at the time, I grew up in a state and they were all boys, and I didn't always want to play football or 40-40 in or whatever the games was back then. It was all boys. And actually, because I was the only girl, they'd pick on me. It was that age. Mix that as well with the fact that my mum had a disability, so she couldn't really spend a lot of time with me or like do the things that I wanted to do because of her illness. So it really did mean that I had to just kind of just come up with my own entertainment. It was so challenging. So yeah, I just turned to art. It was a form of therapy, and it still is actually. Like, I just escape into what I do. So anyway, I had the upper hand there because I'd already been practicing my own sort of art alongside going to school. Sort of like art was my favourite subject, and then I went to college eventually, did art there, flew through that, was so passionate about it, still am to this day. And then I was like, right, well, I might as well go to uni and study art. Oh, I forgot to say as well, like whilst I was in college, there was this, I never forget this, there was this one project that we had to do on the effects of drugs, and we had to imitate what we thought certain drugs like MDMA would have on our reality. But of course, when you're in college, some of us go through experimental stages. I definitely did. So I already knew what MDMA was like. I already knew what LSD was like. So I was also able to use my art to convey that trippiness, whereas some people would have no clue. So again, that period of my life only sort of heightened what I'm into nowadays, which I'll get into. But yeah, just one thing led to another, and I guess like that style's always stuck with me. So I took that style of like bright, bold, vividness, like psychedelia to uni. So I'm like really excited. I'm like, cool, uni's gonna be amazing. The course is gonna like be A-star content. There's gonna be lots of painting, lots of like things that only I want to do. I was wrong. I got there, and it was just mainly essay writing, and they sort of made you go through different projects of like doing a bit of videography, doing a little bit of like, I don't know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I was like so one-track minded. I was like, no, all I want to do is paint. So that was boring. Mixed up with the fact that like, I don't know, it just wasn't for me in that sense. Like some of the people that were there I didn't necessarily connect with. Yeah, a lot of the friends that I was friends with in the course, some of them turned on me. So I didn't really have that good of a time. I think the essays just like annoyed me the most. So anyway, yeah, because I'm just a curious cat, and I was like, right, well, I don't want my university experience to suck. I was like, I'm going to see what the music scene's like. I'm going to see what that's like. I'm going to just like, because I already was from college, I'd like had a huge obsession with drum and bass and dubstep at the time. So I was like, okay, what's Plymouth got to offer in terms of like nightlife? So me just being all about neon, funky colours, just everything extravagant, I then go to these events. And I actually met my then boyfriend. I say then, I haven't got a boyfriend anymore, but that's how I met him. He was a DJ. So we would go along to all these events, and what we would notice, well, me mostly, was that there was a real lack of like decor in these scenes. It was like dreary, mundane venues, but really good DJs. And I was sort of looking around, and sometimes the music was so tinny, but that sound production was nothing to do with what I'm doing. but I was just thinking like ways of like how everything could complement one another. It got to the stage where it literally would just be like a hall with like some decks at the front, and then you could tell that people was a bit uncomfortable to even dance. It was like, I don't know, it just wasn't for me. And I kept finding this over the years of me being at uni. I was like, how is nobody trying to figure something out on how to make these nights even better? But of course I was just a student at uni and I didn't have much time to prioritise to this, so I just literally started to think of evenings of how to incorporate an arty element into these settings. And I think as well, I had like Discount, the scrap store, and there was, at the time, I'd come across loads of like stretchy fabric. I didn't even know you could get it in like glow fabric back then. I was just experimenting, putting like some holes in it and literally just like destroying it. But it did look really cool. So long story short on that, I ended up talking to some event owners at the time, and sort of like, rather than paying for a ticket, I would offer my decorative services. Back then it really wasn't like much of a decorative service. I would just pin up like loads of random bits of like glow fabrics, paintings that I had done, as a way to get free entry. But that also started giving me like a lot of exposure, and people started like really being more curious about it, like, oh, this would look good on our sort of sets, or come and do this here. So I started like dotting myself around from different venues in Plymouth. So yeah, I wouldn't be getting paid for none of it, but at the time it didn't matter because it meant that I was saving money, being a broke student and all. Like, I'd have free entry, get my art out and about, and it was like a form of networking, but I would never refer to it as networking. But I guess looking back now, it put me in touch with like some cool people. And that's kind of like all I wanted back then. And then I graduated, right? So bearing in mind, the decor and the wacky art was always around my art degree. Like none of the stuff that I'm doing now was ever part of like this conceptual thesis that I had to do. So I really was in like two personalities, like two versions of myself. So yeah, I kind of then graduated, still being like overly enthusiastic about everything to do with art. Didn't really want like a boring 9-to-5 job back then. I landed in a 9-to-5 anyway, but it was working as a balloon artist at Party On. So I was like, oh, amazing. And yeah, I had the opportunity to install my webs there. When I say webs, I mean these like UV stretchy webs that I do. You can have a look on my website and any videos that I have on my page. But again, that was an amazing opportunity. It led to like some really great conversations at the store. And I was just thinking of ways to then make it direct to consumer. So even back in sort of like 2018, I was like, right, this is a thing here. I have to come up with ways to make it more accessible to people, because this seems to be like a very niche thing and not many people have access to it or know what to do with it. So I began setting up an Etsy. So yeah, I was on Etsy for quite a few years, launching various UV things like paintings. All of my decorations have been on there, tried and tested. It's gone through numerous different price points, numerous different styles of packaging, you name it. I've tried and tested it. And then once I had sufficient data, I was like, do you know what, I'm going to make the leap to Shopify. So then I made my own website, and it's just, the rest is history. I now ship internationally. I've shipped to nightclubs all around the world, NHS mental health wards up in Sussex, tourist attraction centres, kids play centres such as like Play Train, laser tag venues. Like honestly, the list continues, and I think it's now called B2M, because not only do I do business to business, it's business to customer. So yeah, have a look at what I do and check out for yourself. I'm just a firm believer in persistence pays off. You have a wacky idea, stick with it, roll it out, and just see where it goes.